Aftermath Life Debt. It's the second book in the Aftermath trilogy and Chuck Wendig's chance to correct everything he got wrong in the first book. Life Debt is definitely an improvement over its predecessor, but it doesn't quite fix everything that was wrong with the previous installation. First off, the story has a lot more meat on its bones than the original Aftermath did. While the first book felt like a story that had been stretched out and just felt a bit thin because of it, Life Debt feels like it has a lot more to it. From the freshly born New Republic's politics to the search for Han Solo and the fight to liberate Kashyyyk, this book feels a lot deeper than Aftermath. Also, for the most part, Chuck Wendig has managed to keep up that interesting interaction between the core group of characters that the first Aftermath had. We see more of the Star Wars characters we love from the movies in the book with actual roles, and for the most part when Wendig writes these characters he does a phenomenal job. So well in fact that when I read most of the lines from the characters who were actually in the movies, I can actually hear the character's voice in my head. Maz Kanata, even though she's only in one interlude, reads exactly as I remember her in The Force Awakens, and when Wendig writes Han, I can literally see him in my mind, swaggering and smirking, and I can hear Harrison Ford's voice in my head with all of Han's mannerisms and inflections. Wendig really does deserve praise for how well he's managed to capture these characters' essences. After what the first book was like, I'm genuinely impressed and pleased with how well Wendig managed to do here. But they're not all like that. Leia was neither here nor there, and I think that's in part because of the way Wendig wrote Mon Mothma. The two generally share scenes in Life Debt, so how one character is written directly affects the other. It's a shame because when Leia has scenes on her own, such as the meditation scene, there were no spoken words, but I really enjoyed the character. But Mon Mothma? Chuck Wendig was way off with her character in my opinion, transforming her from the fight for the freedom and equality of all character we saw in Return of the Jedi to this manipulative, duplicitous, for want of a better word, bitch. When I read Life Debt, at no point when reading Mon Mothma's lines could I hear that very softly spoken Mon Mothma I heard at the briefing in Return of the Jedi. It felt like a completely different character, and that means Wendig really missed the mark. I enjoyed Nora and her little band's story. It's a good little adventure that gets deeper as the book goes on, which is something I like. I don't like feeling like the story isn't gaining any depth as I go through it, a crime Wendig committed with the original Aftermath, but I'm pleased to see it's something he's rectified here. Gallius Rax is a fully fleshed out character this time round, having only been introduced in the last few pages of Aftermath, and he's one of the best things about Life Debt. He's a really good bad guy. We don't know anything about his past, save for the few tidbits we discover in the epilogue and prologue and Grand Admiral Ray Sloane's own endeavours, but we do know he's very smart enough to have manipulated all the captains and admirals of the Empire to follow his command through Grand Admiral Sloane. Sloane herself is a bit deeper this time round, but I still think John Jackson Miller writes Sloane better than Wendig ever will. She goes off on her own crusade, trying to find out as much as she can about the mysterious Rax, while throughout the book Rax tests her intelligence, her faith and her ability to follow him blindly. Where Rax comes from shouldn't surprise anyone, but it's a bit surprising that we only find out in this book that Rax is from Jakku. Life Debt came out the year after The Force Awakens, so the original Aftermath is the only one in the trilogy to carry the Journey to the Force Awakens banner. So it would have made more sense for that revelation to be an Aftermath, even if it was in the same few last pages Rax was introduced in. Wendig could have started it as someone remembering about Jakku, then revealed it was the mysterious person pulling rank on Sloane. So I honestly don't understand why he waited for this book to reveal it. So far, out of both books, this is the only thing that has any connection to the Force Awakens. Maybe if Wendig had spent more than 30 days working on the first book, he could have planned it better. The interludes are back again, although this time I enjoyed them less. It was interesting to see what the Acolytes got up to, and that reporter woman is back from the previous book. But there are some things in the interludes that just don't mesh with me. For instance, in Life Debt, Princess Leia has created an Alderaan survivors group to try and preserve the planet's culture and heritage. That's a good idea to include in the story. What I don't like is half of them seem distrustful of her for no apparent reason other than for Wendig to write that they don't trust her. It just doesn't add up for me that one of the faces of the rebellion and native of the planet Alderaan is hated by half the Alderaanians left. That's poor writing in my opinion. It also makes no sense to me whatsoever that Leia is somehow finding the curves of the Death Star, and I'm assuming it's the first one since that's the one that destroyed Alderaan, and she's trying to put the shell of it back together for the Alderaanians to live on, or in. Who knows? To be honest, I wouldn't have thought they would want the thing reconstructed since it was responsible for the destruction of their planet, let alone the fact that the Death Star blew up so there shouldn't be anything left to find. Yet again, poor writing in my opinion. The guy who stole Boba Fett's armour in the last book is back. He has an interlude where pretty much nothing happens, and nothing really happens in Maz's interlude, except she decides to take a ride in her ship. We don't get to see the ride, we just get to see her decide she wants to go for a ride. And this is why I didn't enjoy the interludes very much. Except for the Acolytes interlude, which was genuinely interesting, the rest of them feel like filler that's drawn out over 3 books. I hope there's more to the interludes, or I hope the interludes become a part of the main story in Empire's End, but as it stands, 5 pages pages in this book about an obscure plot and 5 pages in the previous book isn't enough to hold my interest, and to be honest, I end up either having to flick through the original Aftermath to find the interlude that relates to the one I'm reading now but can't quite remember from Aftermath, or I'll just carry on reading because clearly it's just not that important, which makes it filler. I see no reason why the Acolytes couldn't have been brought into the main story. I certainly think someone like Timothy Zahn or Claudia Gray could have done it, so I don't see why Wendig didn't. In other Star Wars books where there were interludes, it felt like either a nice break from the action and main plot of the book, or it felt like a good look at other things that were going on in the galaxy so you could keep track, or it felt like both. In Life Debt, for the most part, they just seem to be there with no real oomph to them. Personally, I feel that unless the Rancor trainer from Return of the Jedi turns out to be Snoke, he doesn't need an interlude. He actually had an interlude in Life Debt. Why? What does it add to the book or the overall story? Absolutely nothing. It's filler. It's drawn out over at least 2 books, and I don't appreciate having to read through this rubbish. It's a waste of my time, and it's something Wendig should have scrapped in favour of writing something relevant, or just left it out altogether. This is the biggest issue with Life Debt for me. It's the legacy of the original Aftermath, and as such it inherits its style, and with its style comes its flaws. We don't need 5 pages about the Rancor trainer, but because the original book's interludes covered stuff like that, Life Debt covers it too. It's something Wendig just isn't willing to scrap, and so we have to put up with it, but it quite simply shouldn't be in the book, and it says to me Wendig doesn't care if the fans enjoyed it or not. If he wants it there, it will be there, even if the entire population of the planet says it shouldn't be there. The grammar in Life Debt is overall much better than in Aftermath, but it's still atrocious in very focused points. There was a 4-page passage where every time she was printed, it was printed as Z, Z-H-E, and every time her was printed, it was printed as Zer, Z-H-E-R. This is completely unacceptable. It kills immersion, it kills flow, it should never have been allowed to go to print like this, and both Chuck Wendig and Disney should be ashamed of themselves for allowing this to happen. Life Debt fixes a lot of issues I had with Aftermath, so it just goes to show that Wendig doesn't actually do half bad when he puts his mind to it, and actually does more than 30 days work per book. That being said, there's still issues, and I hope they're fixed in Empire's End. Wendig needs to stop drawing out pointless plots in the interludes and use them for what other Star Wars authors do: help the reader keep track of what's going on in the rest of the galaxy. In Ahsoka's interludes we saw Bail Organa help in the early rebellion, and we saw Obi-Wan Kenobi training on Tatooine. Stuff that mattered. In Life Debt, we got bullshit about the Rancor trainer. There's a world of difference there in how much I care. This is what I want to see in the interludes in Empire's End, and I see no reason Wendig can't write interludes that actually matter. He needs to fix the grammar before the book goes to print, and actually have his proofreader and his editors do their jobs properly. There's nothing more immersion killing than having to decipher English pages from pages that are supposed to be printed in English but aren't due to lax quality control. Overall, Life Debt is a marked improvement on its predecessor, but it's still nothing to shout about. I would say the story is a lot better, and based on the story alone it's worth a read, but there's just too much filler, far too many grammatical mistakes and printing errors, and characters or plot points that just don't match or directly contradict characters' previously established personalities for me to say it's a good book. It's a shame. Wendig had the opportunity to fix absolutely everything. He had an entire year this time to write a good quality book, and came out with a book that still isn't up to the standards I expect from a Star Wars author. At best, I would say it's mediocre. It's very good in places, and then absolute shit in other places, and it all balances out to average. I said it in my Aftermath review, and my opinion is still the same. If Wendig doesn't markedly improve with Empire's End, I want him to have nothing further to do with the Star Wars universe. We, as paying fans, shouldn't have to put up with subpar novels, and that's exactly what both Aftermath and Life Debt are.